Oopsie doopsie. Where am I going? Excuse me, guys. Sorry for the cough. Good morning, everyone. If you're in Australia, good afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. This is our weekly Q&A live, Monday morning here in downtown Australia, or down country Australia. I'm just organising my settings here. Okay. I feel like I'm a little bit wonky. Sorry, I'm just organising. I've got so much stuff on this desk here. Hey, holy moly! Oh, it's all over the place. I just try and get myself in the frame, so I'm not too much of just a head. Okay, my settings right. Beautiful. Okay, I think I'm all good here. Just make sure I can see the comments. So if you have a question that you'd like me to answer, pop it in the comments. I've already got a couple of questions to answer here. I also, as you probably noticed, put up a reminder in the group, and you can pop your questions in there and I can answer them for you in the live, which is now. So I'm just going to have a sip of my coffee and go into questions. I'll read them from my phone. Okay. Just going into my page. I've got some questions to answer. So just wanted to give out a warm welcome to all our new members in the group. I'll pop up a welcome post for you. Thank you for being here, and I hope you find the group, educational and supportive. I'm sure you will. So anyone who doesn't know, I do a weekly live in the group every Monday morning at 8 o'clock at the moment, Australian Eastern Standard Time, because we're now out of daylight saving. And you can pop your questions, anything you would like to ask me, you can pop them up in the group anytime. Pop up a post, or when I put up the reminder in the group, you can pop your question in the comments section of the reminder. So yeah, just to remember that I do a weekly Q&A, and you can ask me anything to do with off the track thoroughbreds, the horses. I've still got a bit of a cold, guys. I had a bit last week, so I'm still got a little bit of a cold. So excuse me if I'm coughing. And I'm just going to go into our questions for the pop in here. It's easier to read them on my phone. Where am I going? Oh, it's cold down here in Canberra. It's the fourth day into autumn, and it has been so cold. It's just a horrible beginning of autumn with the weather. But in saying that, I don't really like the cold. Why I'm living down near Canberra, I don't know, but I don't like the heat either. The real hot, humid weather. So I'm one of those, I just want perfect weather. But it's just been so cold down here. It's crazy. Okay, let me just go into questions. Where am I? Grips. Oh dear, sorry for the cough, guys. Because it's been cold. Okay. So I've got two questions from Paula. And Paula asks two questions. So do you have, I'll read the two questions out first and then I'll answer them for you. Do you have any thoughts on feeding legumes, in particular chickpeas, split peas and lupins? And Paula says she knows I'm already a fan of lupins. I love lupins. We're lucky to have them here in Australia. I don't think they're available overseas, but you've got your other legumes that are. So I would also like to hear your thoughts on chia seeds and linseed. I cook all of these together in a slow cooker and don't feed a huge amount each feed, but I found this combo that I call porridge. Yeah, it sounds very warming, especially for cool weather, really help build up my 6-year-old's top line. Do you know of any detrimental effects of feeding the above ingredients? So that was the first question. And then I'll read out the second question. Can you give me some tips on how to get my mare to be more responsive to the bit? I'm just doing groundwork with her and trying to get her to respond to the lightest of bit pressure, but she fights any pressure at all, or she will lean against it strongly. Sometimes she will halt with slight bit pressure, but I think it's more than just listening to me say whoa rather than yielding to bit pressure, and when stopping is her preference. Do I just keep trying until she gets more relaxed? She does get tense very quickly when she has a bit in her mouth. She's very sensitive and sweet, and the trainers I got her off said she didn't like racing, which to me translate to she was an emotional wreck. Yeah, exactly, an emotional wreck, yeah. Well, there's a reason she didn't like racing, so it would be interesting to see what behaviours she had in racing. I don't know. I presume you're in Australia, Paula. I'm pretty sure you are. Let me know if you on this live. If not, let me know in the in the replay, because it'd be interesting to look up her racing history. I love doing that. I just think you can learn so much from the history of racing. I can really only do that in Australia because I don't. I know the trainers here too, but not always personally, but I just have more of a connection with the industry here in Australia. It's just not, it's nice to know if you can, their history in racing and how many starts they've had, whether they had any embargoes against them, so any sort of bad ticks, whether, you know, when I say bad ticks, you know, whether they've been disqualified from racing or not racing, something happened in a race, so they weren't allowed to race due to a vet certificate or something like that. And I even like to look at their racing history. I'll go back and look at what, you know, how many starts they had and how they raced and whether they had any injuries and that. So that's really interesting to know. But we'll actually go into the second question. I'll go more into that because I'll go into the first question again. So I'll just read the first question out again for anyone who's missed it. Then I'll answer it. Do you have any thoughts on feeding legumes? In particular, chickpeas, split peas, and lupins. I know you're already a fan of lupins. I would also like to hear your thoughts on chia seeds and linseed. I cook all of these together in a slow cooker and don't feed a huge amount each feed, but I found this combo that I call porridge really helped build up my 6-year-old's top line. Do you know of any detrimental effects of feeding the above ingredients? Okay, well, so that sounds like a really warming feed, Paula. That's nice. Don't know if I could do that for my 20 horses. I'd need a very big crock pot. Although you could. I know you could actually. That's because you wouldn't feed you wouldn't feed much. So yeah, those feeds. So some of these feeds that you're feeding aren't common, so it's not a common. So I looked a couple up for you just because, just to make sure they're okay. So lupins are beautiful. Lupins are a very safe feed for horses. They're high in protein. They've got a good level of healthy fat in them, omega-3s, especially. They do have omega-6 in them as well, but it's a nice healthy fat. They're not high in omega-6 like your omega-6 oils. And they're very low in starch, like they have hardly any starch, so they're a safe feed for any horse that has, you know, laminitis or not actually. You don't want to feed a horse that has active laminitis, anything very concentrate, but any horse that's prone to laminitis, Cushing's disease, things, and metabolic issues, lupins are a wonderful feed for that. So yeah, no problems with feeding lupins at all. And I love, cooking them up in a slow cooker is lovely. Whether you get cracked lupins, if you were doing the slow cooker, I would say get whole lupins, because they hold their nutritional value much longer if they're not cracked. When you get cracked lupins, you don't know how long they've been stored for. I feed cracked lupins because it's they prefer it much better than the micronized lupins that you can get, and I have no issues with the odd bit of cracked lupin. You know, in cracked lupins you can find a whole lupin. I find my horses will leave that at the bottom of their feed bin, because someone has said, oh, but you get some whole lupins through cracked lupins. Well, I don't have an issue with the horses actually eating the whole lupins, and I find very few in them. So I love cracked lupins. Sometimes I soak them. It's just that I have a large number of horses, so and I don't have a problem with feeding them straight out of the bag. But you can soak them, and particularly in winter, it's nice to soak them. So Paula, you cook them in a slow cooker, which sounds really nice. And so lupins are great. Chickpeas, not a common feed for horses here in Australia, but you can feed them. And I did some research for you because I wasn't familiar with chickpeas and split peas. So chickpeas can be fed. Now, what I found, I can email you or forward you the article. There's a Feed Excel website. You would know, Paula, because you've got the Off the Track Thoroughbred Kickstart Roadmap course. So I've got a module on Feed Excel, and she's very good for looking up information on feeds. Nerida Richards is the equine nutritionist, so she did a bit of a look into chickpeas, and chickpeas are fine. I would feed them cooked, and I would they're pretty hard peas, so I wouldn't feed them raw. I would so what's in a chickpea, and also is the same for soybean meal, is what they call a trypsin inhibitor. So this is a little sort of a type of enzyme that will prohibit the absorption and the utilization of protein in the horse's body. So trypsin inhibitor in soybean meal is a lot higher than it is in chickpeas. So this is the reason for the necessity of feeding a well-cooked soybean meal and having it tested for the trypsin inhibitor. Chickpeas, there's only a low level of trypsin inhibitor, so you won't, even if you're cooking it in a slow cooker, there's not enough research done to say that it's going to kill the trypsin inhibitor. So I wouldn't go on the fact that you're feeding them, cooking it, that it's going to get rid of the trypsin inhibitor. So just when you're feeding chickpeas, be aware that there is trypsin inhibitor in it, but it is a lot lower than soybean meal. And if you're only feeding a low quantity, there won't be any problems with stopping the absorption of protein. And the fact that you're seeing such a good outcome of a nice top line in your thoroughbred is a sign that it's definitely not. So they're very good. They've got a good level of protein, chickpeas. They've got a nice level of lysine in them, which is probably what's causing the lysine's very good for building top line in horses. So yeah, chickpeas are fine, especially with the quantity that you're feeding. You would only have an issue with chickpeas if you are feeding a large amount. And that would be with the trypsin inhibitor. So chickpeas great, lupins great, as you know. Split peas, now look, I would probably, there's not enough research done with split peas, and yeah, look, I probably wouldn't, I could not find anything on split peas, and I would be a little bit on the cautious side with split peas because you don't know about the trypsin inhibitor. I probably wouldn't worry too much with the amount that you're feeding, but I personally, because there's not enough research done on split peas, I would sit on the cautious side, and I wouldn't feed them. I wouldn't feed the split peas just because there's not enough research done on them. You've got a really good protein source from your chickpeas and from your lupins, and I think that just the chickpeas and the lupins is a really nice combination. So just because of the lack of research on split peas, I would probably lay on the side of caution. You could reach out to Nerida Richards in Feed Excel and ask her. She's a wonderful equine nutritionist, and yeah, I can give you the link to that if you wanted to ask more about that in the Feed Excel side. But from my perspective, I couldn't find anything, and you just want to be aware of anything that you're feeding your horses, whether it has any sort of anti-nutritional factors with it, which is what the trypsin inhibitor is. It's an anti-nutritional, like an enzyme in it that stops the absorption of protein in this instance with the trypsin inhibitor. So other than the split peas, chickpeas and lupins, beautiful. Just keeping it on the low level with the chickpeas, which you are. And yeah, lovely, 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 lovely. I think it's a really nice combination that you have. Yeah, keeping aside the split peas, which I don't know a lot about and couldn't find much on it. So now let's move on to chia seeds and linseed. Chia seeds and linseed, beautiful. You're cooking it all together. So linseed, I think, so cooking it up, one seed, your linseeds, I would, so linseed has an anti-nutritional cofactor in it, which can cause some toxicity in horses. There's been quite a bit of research done on linseed, so definitely cooking is the way to go. People do feed raw linseed. With the levels that they feed, there doesn't seem to be an issue, but I like to stay on the side of caution. So if you're feeding linseeds, I would cook them, which you are doing, and they're a beautiful feed. High fat, high omega-3, great for an anti-inflammatory source of fatty, like a fatty oil in your horse's diet, and also to energy, and grain-free. So a nice source of energy, which is grain-free. So linseed's great, and cooking them, I would cook them, which is also what you're doing. And chia seeds. So chia seeds, I'm just going to have a sip of my coffee. Sort of a new, I think they've been around for a long while, and I think they have been fed in horses' diets for quite a while, but they're sort of coming to the surface as more common feed in horses' diets in recent years. And chia seeds are once again a really nice feed for horses. They are safe. I would personally like to soak them. You know how chia seeds will just absorb all this water, and yeah, I would soak them before I feed them, just once again to be on the safe side, just so there's no risk of them sort of absorbing in the horse's stomach. I'm a bit of a cautious person, so chia seeds soaked, and they turn into like a jelly-like substance. So chia is another beautiful feed for horses. I would recommend feeding them soaked or cooked, and also too a really nice level of omega-3 fatty acids for your horse, grain-free, a really nice source of energy. So yeah, look, the chia seeds are beautiful. They also would be contributing to the top line. So I think you have a really lovely combination of a really good protein source. So chia seeds are once again a protein source as well. So your linseed, combination of linseeds and chia seeds and your lupin and your chickpeas is beautiful. I think it's a really lovely combination. I love it. You're giving me some ideas myself. I don't know how I would do it with on a larger scale with my horses, but particularly coming into winter, I think you've got a really nice combination. I would probably just do myself the linseeds and the chia seeds separately, but that's for me on a larger scale. But on, you know, feeding a handful of horses, you could do what you're doing and cook it up in a crock pot. Yeah, look, I would just look into, I don't think there would be any with the chia seeds destroying any nutritional cofactors. I'm not sure there, but I wouldn't think so. If it doesn't for the linseed, I wouldn't imagine it would for the chia seed. So I think that what you're feeding is lovely. There's no issues other than the split peas, which couldn't find any real source of information on the split peas for horses. So I would reach out. I would avoid the split peas. Just not that it seems to be causing any problems, but I don't know if you need it with your chickpeas and your lupins for a start. I think the lupins and the chickpeas are beautiful. Just as I mentioned, the trypsin inhibitor in their chickpeas is only very low, and I wouldn't worry about that, and unless you were feeding a whole, a large amount. And it's got a beautiful source of lysine, chickpeas, and protein, and healthy fat. So and I love lupins, and the chai. So the chickpeas, the lupins, the chai seeds, and the linseed is beautiful. Well done. I think it's a beautiful combination. Yeah, let me know what you feed. Do you put that in with chaff or a fiber protect or something? I'd be interested to know what you use with that. I love it. I think you're all really good there, Paula. Let me know if you find out any more on the split peas. I will reach out on Feed Excel as well, just to find out a bit more. But other than the split peas, beautiful, all good, no issues. Yeah, so that's that question answered. Let me know if you have any more questions with that one. You've actually got me looking into adding some chia seeds to my horse's diet. I have heard quite a bit about chia seeds. Don't want to delete that. Whether I'm not sure of the price, the price of things feeding on a large scale, but I'll find out. Okay, so I'm just going to go to your question 2 now. Don't for my cough here. Would you guys give me one moment to make another quick coffee? I love coffee. I'll just put my machine on. I'll come back and I'll answer your second question, Paula. I'm just going to top up my coffee. You see here, I've got my little Poppy. Sorry, I've got my dirty shirt on. Here's my little Poppy. Oh, it's one of those. Poppy is my little receptionist, my little admin that sits on this desk. I've got a chair next to me, and she sits on the chair. She's obsessed with this chair. Every time she's in the house, she's on the chair, unless she's in bed, which she sleeps in the bed with me. She's a little rescue, and you're about 13 now, aren't you? And she's having a second lease in life. I don't think she was very happy in a previous life, so she is just, and she's put on about 10 kilos. She was very skinny when she came to me, about 10 kilos. So you can see we're a bit fat. Look at that. It's just nice and curvy, but you're not too fat. Okay. I'm just going to put my machine on. I'll be back for my second coffee. Love my coffee. I've got all my doggies around me here, guys. Okay. Nearly there, guys. Okay. It's just making, it's just filling up my cup now. So I'll just read out my second question. Can you give me some tips on how to get my mare to be more responsive to the bit? I'm just doing groundwork with her and trying to get her to respond to the lightest of bit pressure, but she fights any pressure at all, or she will lean against it strongly. Sometimes she will halt with slight bit pressure, but I think it's more that she's listening to me say whoa rather than yielding to bit pressure, and when stopping is a preference. Do I just keep trying until she gets more relaxed? She does get tense very quickly when she has a bit in her mouth. She's very sensitive and sweet, and the trainers I got her off said she didn't like racing, which to me translates to she was an emotional wreck. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I'll just get my coffee. What she did. Okay. I think I would have been a barista had I not gone into horses. I love coffee. I love making coffee. Paula, so it'd be interesting. I'd be interested to know just because I think knowing as much about your horse as possible. What trainer she came from, how many starts she had, and I don't know if I've asked you this before. I get a lot of questions, so I get a bit confused sometimes. If I've asked questions before, and her history in racing, just gives you a little bit of a broader understanding of your horse. I really like to know as much about them as possible and their temperament and how they are. Like, for instance, this horse that I have with me at the moment, he's going home soon, Ty. So Ty's a 9-year-old off the track thoroughbred. He came to me when he was 8. He came to me he's been here for quite a while. He came to me in June. He had some, yeah, he'd been through a pretty brutal race career. So I looked up his racing history, and he had a horrendous, like, he had a 30-year-old horse's back. His back was so dipped. So I thought, no, there's something's gone wrong here. So I looked into his racing history. I looked at who he was with. In Australia, I know the trainers. I actually have a pretty good idea of a lot of the trainers and what they're like. And not all of them, obviously, but just have more of an understanding. Particularly with this fellow, I know country trainer, and he came from. So this horse was with a really good city trainer. He was with Chris Roller to start with, and then moved up to country trainers further on in his career. But it gave me a really good insight into him and an understanding. And even, he's a war horse. He's an amazing horse. I'm just fixing the laptop up here. He had about 70 something starts, and he was compensating. You know, you could see just following his. I look even into the any embargoes or things like that in their race career, and it just gives you a really good understanding of the horse. And I could just see that I could, and even gear changes, going back and seeing, what trainers have done. They've got, put a tongue tie on, they've taken a tongue tie off, because in Australia, and I presume overseas as well, every gear change has to be recorded, and they have to let them know. So you can go into your horse's racing history and then go and look at gear changes, embargoes, whether they were needed a vet certificate said not to race, and then they go and quite often they'll get it cleared, the next day, and then they've cleared. So you want to know, well, what happened for that vet certificate to come out in that race. And I looked into, this is just using the example of this horse, I looked into his career and could see that way back as a 2-year-old, they already had what they call a bubble cheeker on him, which is, I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit off track off your question here, Paula, but just getting an idea of trying to learn as much as possible about your horse. So with this horse, Ty, he had a bubble cheeker on, which showed me, so a bubble cheeker is, so if you've got a horse that is hanging left, okay, so there's a reason the horse is hanging left, and it's usually because he's getting away from pain. And this, so he was, I can't remember the side, I think he had a left bubble cheeker on, so it's like a little plastic rubbery piece of equipment that goes on the inside of the bit, so it's like spiky, has little spikes on it. So it's not steel spikes or anything, but it just puts a bit of pressure on to ask the horse is drifting left, you want him back on track. He's to try and go straight. So he had a bubble cheeker on all the way back when he was 2. So to me, looking at that is a sign that there's something not right. There's a reason he's hanging. And this is where I get a little bit frustrated with just throwing gear on them, instead of looking at why is he hanging. So this poor guy, to me, he's raced with pain and unsound way back, as a 2-year-old. But he did have so I'd say that he was spelled, because he did have, I think it was around 12 months or 6 months. There's a couple of areas in his, so I look at his race career and I think, oh, well, he's had a 6-month block there, a 9-month block there, like 6, 9, 10, 12 months is a sign of injury. So I can see, going back to this horse's career, well, it looks as if he's having a spell because of an injury, and he did have a block, at least one block. I think it was about 9-10 months. So, and he has the signs of him like a dropped fetlock, which means he's more than often done a suspensory ligament. So I'd say that was it, and that's his off front, which is his right front foreleg. So if he had a left bubble cheeker on, which means he's hanging to the left, wanting to drift to the left, that's a sign that he wants to get off the off front foreleg, his right foreleg. So it all comes together and makes a picture. So I've put a picture in my head of the story of Ty, his racing career. I do it with all my horses, and I've got I've got 17 off the track thoroughbreds, and even my two. I know the history of my other two as well. One I've had from a weanling, my pony and Toothless. So I know the history of all my horses pretty much. And it just gives me a picture of the horse. That's how I work, and so I'm recommending it to you. If you can, get a sort of a picture, and you get to know the horse and think, oh, well, it's like if you've got met someone that's had a very traumatic childhood, or someone that's had a good childhood. It sort of makes them up for what they are now. But horses can't speak to us. So anyway, be interesting to know with your mare, Paula. Now, with the bit, so I'll just break this up. So can you be more responsive to the bit? So yes, I can definitely give you some tips on how to get her responsive to the bit. So it sounds like you're doing everything in hand first, which is really good. So we start off with the in-hand work, asking them to stop and go in hand before we go up. I start with lead rein pressure. So yeah, I'll start. So I always start with the head collar and lead rope first, and then I go to the bit in hand, and then I go up to under saddle with the bit. So I'd ask first whether you have got her stopping and going lightly to in hand pressure in a head collar and lead rope. Now you can find some information on equitation science websites. I've had a bit of a nightmare situation because I've got a whole course of this coming out, walking you through exactly how to do all of this in hand with the bit. And I had a nightmare because it's in my Off the Track Thoroughbred Success Academy, and I accidentally deleted a whole 4 weeks of content. So Paula, I have all this in the course to show you and everyone that's in the academy. It was extremely depressing. So I'm actually redoing all the content and the lessons now. I have all the raw footage. I have all the videos. It's just that I had them all edited and your copy and everything. And that's just took so long. And when I thought I was doing a copy of the course, I had deleted the whole lot instead. So things happen. Shit happens. I know I'm not the only one that's done this, because I've reached out to tech support and things like that, and Apple and the whole lot, because I have a Mac, so it was done on my laptop. But unfortunately, it's all gone. So I'm redoing it as fast as possible for you guys. So I have all that coming up in the course to be able to show you that. In saying that, just to get an idea, it's really good if you've done it. It's important to do the Kickstart Roadmap course and to go through particularly I've got a training system where I show you the training scale up there of training stop and go and turn and yield. So to get your mare to be soft to the bit, first of all, we want to start with in hand, in head collar first. So going to her standing in hand and asking her to come forward and to teach her to give to pressure with the head collar and lead rope. So that she understands that she can give to pressure. If she doesn't understand how to give to pressure nice and softly in self-carriage in the head collar and lead rope, she's not going to give to pressure with the bit, and she's going to react in a more aversive way to the bit, because one, she's going to have more than likely pain associations with the bit. And that would have come from racing, and it would be interesting to see why they said she disliked racing, because she's obviously shown some behavior issues. Be interesting to see whether she had a tongue tie on in racing, in her racing career. So you could find that out. And I would, so to, before you go to the bit, have her stopping and going lightly in hand first in a head collar and lead rope. And not only is this teaching her to gain some self-carriage, so because part of this leaning on the bit is a lack of self-carriage and a lack of balance in her body. So teaching her to have a sense of self-carriage in hand with the head collar and lead rope, so you're not putting pressure on her mouth, is going to then move on to when you do it with the bit. So that's already taking pressure off her mouth. And it's already going to take pressure off the fact that you're not going to have to put as much pressure on the bit, because she's going to understand the give to pressure. She's going to understand the feeling of having her body in self-carriage. I have got a video up of Tommy, retraining Tommy, in my YouTube videos where I'm doing this, and he shows the leaning on the bit. He gets a bit antsy, actually. He sort of wants to come forward and that. So Paula, I don't know if you've watched that. That can be maybe a kickstart, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Let me know and I can link those up to you, because they're my YouTube videos. And so the tips is to train her stop and go in hand, in the head collar and lead rope first, where she's not leaning into the pressure, and then move on to the bit pressure. So that's the first step with that. So in the groundwork, I wouldn't be even using the bit. I would be using head collar and lead rope. To her respond to the lightest bit of pressure. So when you say she fights any pressure at all, or she will lean against it strongly, address this in the head collar and lead rope, so without a bit, and having her stopping so softly in the head collar and lead rope that it's fluid. So don't even worry about the bit yet while you're working in your groundwork. Obviously we need a bit for safety, and you want her to be able to respond to a bit when you're in the saddle, but at the moment I would avoid the bit and work in hand with your head collar and lead rope. And then all the way, so I teach in hand, head collar and lead rope, all the way to they're so fluid and light in the head collar and lead rope, and also bending and flexing in the head collar and lead rope. So then when you go and put the bit pressure on, you can even combine the two, so you can have the head collar and lead rope and then incorporate the bit to it, so that you ask slightly with the bit first and then ask with the head collar and lead rope. We can talk more about that later, but it's asking for a light response with the bit, and then if she doesn't respond, instead of having to use firm pressure with the bit, you can ask her with the head collar and lead rope. But by that time you've already got her responding so lightly to the pressure of the head collar. I would do, unless she's a real bully of a horse, you know, and pushing into you and dangerous, I would just do a normal webbing head collar. I know a lot of trainers use the rope head collars. I use just a normal webbing head collar and lead rope. And I'm strong, and I've worked with thoroughbreds for a long while, but unless you've got a very bully horse, if you can ask her to step back and give to pressure with the head collar and lead rope, I would just stick to a normal standard webbing head collar, or leather one if you've got it, and have her giving really lightly to that. So when she leans against it strongly, and most off-the-track thoroughbreds will really lean against pressure and lean into it, because that's what they've been taught to do in racing, leaning into the bit. You'll find that in the Kickstart roadmap. I go through why they're leaning into the bit. That's part of racing and galloping. They've been taught to lean into the bit, and then they also use it as a form of balance. So they're sort of on the forehand. So it's very hard. They have to be retrained in not only learning abilities, but also in being able to carry their body in a different posture, so that they're weight bearing more on their hind end and not putting so much weight on their forelegs and their front end. So that also, that just teaching her stop and go in hand is also strengthening her hind end, getting to use her hind end. If they're really avoiding wanting to put weight on their hind end, well, then you also look at, and this is all to do with the holistic part of retraining, which I go into in the kickstart, is making sure that there's no pain related issues, that they're not wanting to weight bear on their hind end other than a weakness. So off the track thoroughbreds tend to be very much forehand based, you know, and leaning sort of downward into bit pressure. So we need to gradually and progressively teach them to give to pressure and put more weight on their hind end. And this is a gradual process. Now I'll just break it down to so we've decided we're not going to use the bit. We're going to do this in the head, collar and lead rope. So let's trying to get her to respond to the lightest bit of bit pressure. Now, off the track thoroughbreds, it takes a while to get them to respond to light pressure. And I've got a video actually where I'm comparing an off the track thoroughbred dragon, who I've already retrained, to a horse I'm bringing him in, and you can just see. And once you see in the Thai retraining series with Thai, you can just see how heavy he is to start with, and also too, asking him for head down, I could have swung off him his head and he would have braced against it. So they lean into pressure and they won't give to pressure. So we have to teach them that. So the way to teach them that is, and just explain this with answering your question, sometimes she will halt with slight bit pressure, but I think it's more that she's listening to me to say, right, whoa. So firstly, don't use any. So you want to train every single response singularly. That's with words. So the first thing you want to do is train the in-hand lead pressure, her giving to pressure first, before you incorporate any words. So I would suggest don't use whoa, because horses learn by association. So she probably does have an association with stopping from you saying whoa. So excuse me, I've got a hiccup. Remove the word whoa. So don't use any word signals at the moment, and just have her training to stop with the pressure release. And then you can reward her by with a scratch and things like that, but keep it very simple. Okay, break it up. So you're training one response. You want her to give to pressure. So remove the word whoa, and just teach her to respond to pressure. Sometimes I think it's more, so more listening to the whoa than yielding to the pressure. Do I just keep trying until she gets more relaxed? She does get very tense quickly when she has a bit in her mouth. So we've decided to remove the bit. So that's going to solve that problem. And then when you reintroduce the bit, she will more than likely be a lot better with it. And we can look at maybe the bit that you have, you know, whether there's a better bit for her, but I would not worry about the bit at the moment, and until you've got her really nice and light to her stop and go responses in hand with the head, collar and lead rope. And then put the bit, reintroduce the bit and see how she is then. So she will fight any pressure at all, or she will lean against it strongly. Yeah, so this is very typical with off the track thoroughbreds. So what you need to do is reward any first response. So she will resist it, and yeah, I mean, and this is, it'd be interesting to do. I can't wait to get the retraining series with Ty back out. I was so gutted when I lost it, because there's so much information in it. I do all of this. So with Ty, for instance, asking him for head down, whether it's asking for stop and go, so we ask for stop and go, you need to reward the slightest bit of giving to pressure. So for instance, if you're asking for your mare to come forward, reward, it's just imagine you're asking her to come forward and she's leaning and she's heavy and she's not wanting to come forward, and you always ask with light pressure first, then you need to increase the pressure, never release the pressure. Okay, so you need to increase the intensity. Light, heavier, 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 heavier. She takes one step forward, release, reward. reward that slightest bit of give to pressure with an action of a foot, like movement, not her just leaning forward, but she needs to take at least one step forward. As soon as she's taken one step forward, release the pressure. Horses learn by association, so she has learned that as soon as she takes one step forward, the pressure goes. And there's a training scale of, once again, I've got all of this. This is coming up. So Paula, this is the training scales coming up in the first lessons. I'm working on them right again, redoing them. The training scale, I've got these cards here. I don't know if you can see them. I'll put them up. It might be really handy. Anyone interested to get the equitation science books. They're fantastic because they've got everything that we're going through. So I'm just going to put the training scale up here because this is going to give me, you'll go into the equitation. So this is in the Kickstart Roadmap course as well. I've got this in my, I talk about this in the last modules in the flowchart. But that reward of that one step forward is your basic response. So she's going to learn that the pressure goes as soon as she's taken a step forward. Then what you need to do is you need to repeat this. Horses learn by repetition and they can't recall memory. So you need to repeat this about this stepping forward, just say 5 to 7 times the first time. So once she's taken that step forward, release. Now within 5 seconds, ask again, ask with forward, ask her with to step forward lightly, and you'll ask for light pressure. She's not responding. Firmer, firmer, firmer. Give as soon as she takes that one step forward again. Okay, give. Say good girl. Give her a stroke on the head. Third time, ask her again. Light, firmer, firmer, firmer. She takes that slight pressure forward. Give. That's the third repetition. Fourth repetition, she's maybe going to take that step forward faster. She will take that step forward to a lighter pressure. She will eventually do that. It's so different working with off-the-track thoroughbreds than it is with other horses that just haven't habituated to so much pressure. Thoroughbreds have habituated to so much pressure. It is like asking a freight train, right? Pulling a freight train sometimes. It is just, yeah, it is crazy if you've worked with other horses. That you just think, oh my God, are they going to take a step forward? You can literally lean off them, but they will. It's a lot harder. It's a lot, I'm not going to say it's a lot, well, it is harder, but it's a lot more, it's going to take a lot more patience and a lot more time to get an off-the-track thoroughbred responding to light pressure than it is a stock horse, another horse, unless they've, habituated to a lot of pressure in other ways other than racing. But you will get there. You will get there. Ty and my other horses, Dragon, are a symptom of, look at some of the updated versions of Ty now. Even riding, he's going around in self-carriage. He's beautiful. But he was, and that's taken a long while. This is nearly a year of training. I mean, I take my time with them and I do it progressively, but it's building such a strong foundation. So I know she's leaning into pressure, but it's a matter of rewarding that slightest bit of response from her, and she will learn to associate the release of pressure to what she responds to. So it's a matter of us releasing the pressure at the right time. So repeat that first exercise. I'm using the example of stepping forward. Okay, so you imagine you're asking her to step forward, she's hanging and leaning back. She takes that one step forward, you release the pressure. Give her a stroke on the head, say good girl. Within 5 seconds, ask her for another step forward, release. Within 5 seconds, another repetition, step forward, release. Do that 5 times, give her a break for about, just say we're working on the go forward response. Usually the go forward, the stop and go, you have to work together because you're going to have to ask your horse to stop. Highly recommend going and looking at the first and second lesson with Tommy, because I've got these in my YouTube videos that I do this. I've got more of Tommy actually he got a little bit unwell. So that series is just picking up again now because he had some terrible problems reacting to pasture. But just started with Tommy again. So we'll pick up on that in the YouTube series. I've got all this already filmed. All of this is with Ty. I've got 70 videos that I have to redo, but they're all there ready to be shown for you guys. So they're there. But that's how you teach her to give to pressure. And so let's just work with one thing. So we're working with the go forward response. So then have a break. Just say you've done 5 repetitions of asking her to come forward. Have a minute and a half to 2 minutes break. And then you do exactly the same thing, the forward, stopping and go, another, just say 5 times, and you will find that she's giving to pressure a little bit earlier. So once again, just say you've had your minute and a half break. You then ask her to step forward, okay, and firmer pressure with the lead rope, firmer. She takes a step forward, release. Another 5, within 5 seconds, forward step, forward, release. Okay, give. Just with this forward, it's best to actually ask if they're very resistant to stepping forward. So you're standing in front of the horse, okay, just off to the side. And it's a bit easier if they're very resistant in coming forward, or stopping, the same thing. Stopping, if she's heavy leaning, it's the same principle. Leaning and doesn't want to stop, lighter pressure backwards towards her gullet, towards her chest, backwards. As soon as she stops, release. And stopping to giving to pressure, not leaning into it. You want her to feel like she's given to the pressure. And they will feel very heavy, and they'll feel very on the forehand. And a lot of this is not only the habituation to pressure, but also the fact that they're so used to carrying so much weight on their forehand that they're not used to putting weight on their hind end. And they cause also too pain and tight muscles and little things that could be going on their hind end where they're avoiding putting weight on their hind end. So that's always too important to address any kissing spine, sacroiliac issues, and the fact that they've had a lot of wear and tear throughout their body and their sacroiliac and their sacroiliac. So then when we're asking them to put weight on their hind end, which we do, just even the stopping and going, is asking them to put more weight on their hind end to make sure that there's no pain related issues that are happening there, and that it's just weakness. And hence the reason also to be very progressive with teaching your off the track thoroughbred to be in self carriage. It's amazing, just in hand stopping and going is already starting to strengthen up their hind end. In this, just the little steps. The whole forcing, asking them to do 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 steps back is not good. Not good because you're not training giving to pressure correctly. And also too, you see it quite a bit, making them to step 6, 7 steps back by shaking the lead rope and that. I mean, you have to think of an area of your body, just say you have a lot of lower back pain, and then someone's asking you to do something that puts a lot of pressure on their lower back. Well, that's going to be painful, and it's also you're going to want to resist putting stress on that area, and also you're going to want to avoid doing it, and then you're going to tense up your body. So as this retraining the basic responses of stop and go is sort of very similar to your classical dressage approach, putting the well-being of the horse first and doing everything in breaking it up in single responses and then putting everything together. So that's how you teach her to give to pressure, and you will find train every single response separately. So it'll be interesting to see when you say that she's sometimes she will halt. Okay, so we're talking about your stop response. So I missed that one. Well, I didn't miss it, but stopping response. So let's just go back to the example of you're asking her to stop and she's leaning into pressure. So whether it's the bit or the head collar, so just imagine in hand, whether the bit or the pressure, the head collar, but we're going to now go back to the head collar pressure, okay, because we're not going to work in the bit. But even with the bit pressure, she's leaning, just imagine she's leaning and heavy and she's blah, 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 with a... That was lovely, isn't it? But that, as soon as she gives to the pressure, and you'll find she'll give to the pressure without the bit much easier, because she's got some she most likely has negative associations with the bit, and she's feeling pain. She's going to feel a lot less pain with the head collar and lead rope. But you feel this really heavy leaning. You will ask her, so with the stop, you are going to have to ask her, with a backward step. Okay, so ask her with that stop response. She's leaning into the pressure. Ask for one backward step. Give. As soon as she's taken that backward step and you feel that release of pressure, give. Reward. Say, good girl, pat her on the head, and do it. So exactly the same as the go forward response is the same back. So forward, but you've asked her to step back. Okay, so you're going to have to ask her to take a forward step. So you work with your stop and go at the same time with these basic responses, because you don't want to keep walking her back. I would do this forward, stop. So you're asking her to come forward. She's going to be most likely heavy to the forward response. She may be a bit better with the forward response. Ask for, if she's better with the forward response, ask her for 2 or 3 steps. Stop. She's going to be very heavy, leaning. Ask for one little step back as soon as she gives that release. And the repetition is going to, eventually she will start to learn to give to lighter pressure. It's repetition, so just work on 2 things. I just start off with your stop and go first and have them a lot lighter to the stop and go, and it might take a week of just training your stop and go in hand before you move on to your turn and your yield. So just training the stop and go in hand in a head collar and lead rope tool. They feel really fluid. And then you can start to incorporate the turn. So I'm just going to, and I suggest getting either the ESI books, because it's such a wealth of knowledge, and everything that I teach is equitation science. So to have the backup of the training scale, I've got it. I'll put it up. I've got a lot of charts that I'm going to put up in the Academy, so I have those for you to download and even print out if you want. But I'll show you here, and I know one of our beautiful members in the Academy, Joni, has already purchased these, so I'll show you I've got them all, but the shaping scale. So this is I'll explain it to you. If I've got my son, you probably can't. Let me just move this. I'll come to the side, so I'll find the page. This is the ESI training cards. I'm just trying to find page 1, page 5, page 6, page 4, page 2. Here we go. They're awesome. I highly recommend getting any of the equitation science books, because they're so valuable. I mean, it's just so valuable to go back to. There's not a lot of videos out there as much as there is the books. There's training things. So through the course and that, I'm doing the diploma as we speak, but I spent a year down with Andrew McLean down the Australian Equine Behaviour Centre before there was even a diploma. So I'm very privileged to do that. It was back in 2003, and my horse, I think I've gone through this a couple of times, my horse is in one of the books, because I was down there when he was writing one of his books. But here is, can you see, oh, I've got a cramp in my leg. I'll try and get out of the sun. So this is the ESI training toolkit. Little cards, only 24 bucks or something, I think, or 15, I'm not sure. But this is a little toolkit that you can purchase, and it's just handy, the basic principles. So I'll give you an example, and this is what I've just been talking about. So I've got this in the Kickstart course, the 10 principles of training. I've actually got that, and you can print that out as well in the Kickstart course. So all this is in the Kickstart roadmap course, but this is in the cards as well, and I go into detail in the Kickstart roadmap with it. The shaping scale. So what I just explained in this live is training your stop and go, so that heavy feeling is part of what is called the shaping scale. So when we're training something, and this is, I don't know if you can see that, I've got this in the Kickstart course, but just, you know, I'm not going into detail, because the Academy is when I'm going into more detail with this. It's a lot of work, and I want to try and make it as clear and as possible to you guys, because I know how hard I found it trying to understand all of this with training horses. Like, it was really hard, especially when we've come from, I know for myself, coming from your pony club days and your more traditional, when you're getting into your dressage show jumping. I've done dressage show jumping and all of that, the real traditional, have your horse rounder, and forward, more leg, bend, flex, all of that, and you're like, I mean, I was a mess. I was like, well, how do I get my horse rounder? And the whole handy stuff. That's horrible. So we have to relearn all of that ourselves first and go back and try and understand everything. So I'm trying to make everything really clear for you guys so that when I'm teaching at that, it's going to make sense. Because I found it, like, honestly, when I spent a year down at the Australian Equine Behaviour Centre with Andrew McLean, a year full time working down there, having lessons with all of that, teaching this, I still came back. I was still struggling with getting my horse light and on the bit. I mean, I still came back with both my horses and I was still struggling. And I had a full year of learning all of this, Australian equitation science, the truth about horses. My horse is in. Oh, look at this. This is, my horse is in. I actually worked that girl there. I was down there when she was working there, and all of this. My horse is in this book. I was down there when Andrew was teaching the truth about horses. That's, he's signed this. So that's the truth about horses. Warwick, that's his son. That's Magic, the stallion. I was down there for a whole year learning all of this. I rode in that arena and I still came back and I still was struggling with my off-the-track thoroughbred particularly. So it just goes to show how hard training horses can be, especially when you've come from, and particularly, so my off-the-track thoroughbred, I still remember riding in the arena down there in 2003. I had both my horses down there and I still could not get them. I still had them up and I was like, how do I get my horse off the track thoroughbred particularly? But both of them were still bracing against the bit. So not everything, all of this back then still didn't all come together for me. I do remember what clicked. This is a real long, I'm talking along, probably rambling a bit in this Q&A, but anyway. I do remember just going into my personal experiences. So I spent a year down at the Australian Equine Behaviour Centre. I sat through all the workshops. A year later, I was still struggling with my horses. Not anything lacking in this, but though this was back in 2003. So what's this? We're nearly 20 years later, 2003 to 2004, I was down there. 20 years later, I mean, equitation science has come so far and other things as well. So there's a lot more information out there. But I just remember what sort of put it, it's just my experiences and my struggling. And it's really interesting. My horse here, Dragon, which has just come back into work, he was a bit of a learning curve for me because I was still struggling. I'm like, oh my God, am I a failure? Why can't I get this? And I felt like a failure, but I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I've always had a perfection type of personality and I like things to be done well. So I'm like, why can't I get this? But I'm glad I went through all these struggles because I know now, I mean, I've still got a lot to learn like all of us. We're always learning, but I'm like, wow, I know, you know, to my little, had a heater on because it's cold. Why it wasn't working, and there's just a couple of little things that you need to add to all of this. I'll get to that in a moment in my experience, but going through, I'm all over the place, but the cards show the shaping scale. So where you're at, so with Paula, with your heavy, okay, just teaching her to give to the bit, give to the head collar we're going to go to now is, if you're going to the kickstart, because I know you've got access to that, that's basic to temp. We're first teaching our horse basic to temp. Okay, then, so this is horse offers an attempt at the correct response. An attempt, it's not perfect, it still feels heavy, it's all of that. I don't know if you can feel it. It's an attempt. So can you see then, so this is a shaping scale. This is like the German training scale. If you understand dressage, the history of dressage, you've got your German training scale. This is similar to this, okay, but not, you know, Andrew, this is Andrew McLean. This is the Australian version of their equitation science training, which I follow. The basic attempt is similar to the training scale, but in their own way. Then when your horse starts to respond lightly, okay, through repetition and releasing the pressure at the right time, it goes up to what is called obedience. Obedience. So obedience is horse offers an immediate response from a light aid. So when your horse is starting to stop at a light pressure and not leaning, that's when you've achieved your obedience. Okay, so this is, and just seeing where Ty is now at under saddle riding in rhythm. So is you can see he's up to the rhythm level. So then you go, oh, cool, I've got my horse up to obedience. Then we move on to rhythm where they're really light. So you can see here, I'm going rhythm. Okay, so rhythm is horse maintains rhythm and tempo. So slows and quickens and shorten and lengthens. So this is all in hand first. So just imagine you've got your horse, your off the track thoroughbred, so light and responsive that the lightest pressure they go forward, a little bit of backward pressure they stop, backwards light, very fluid. Okay, so that's your rhythm. That's your rhythm, nice and fluid and going around. It takes ages to get to rhythm with an off the track thoroughbred. Ty would still not be in rhythm, okay, in hand. I'd have to go back. He was, and he'll be a lot better. He may be in rhythm, but because we've done so much under saddle work now, because you're targeting to his young rider, and she's not going to be in hand and all of that, doing all of this. But you've got to train this. But I will have to go back and just refresh his rhythm. If he starts to get heavy, just go back and you refresh it. He's learnt all of this. But also too, going back when I was training rhythm with Ty, he was extremely weak over his top line, extremely weak, and he was also sore in his hind end. But anyway, when you're going through this training scale, it's going to take, depending on your off the track thoroughbred and what, how they are, how long it gets there. So then you can see up here, straightness. So this is where, okay, you've got your horse nice and fluid and all of that. So I'm actually up to under saddle. So this is in hand and under saddle. See in my latest videos with Ty, I'm up to straightness. So he's still, and straightness has to do with, you've got to get your horse straight, you have to have basic to tempt, obedience, rhythm, to be able to have your horse traveling straight in hand and under saddle. Your horse is going to be drifting. So Ty still drifts. Okay, he's still not straight because he's weaker in one hind end. So I'm having to work getting him stronger and balanced and all of that. But I can keep him as he drifts off his line, because I've already trained in him in hand first and under saddle. I've already trained him in his turns and to yield to pressure. I can then help him get straightness by him responding to my aids. You cannot straighten a horse if you haven't taught them all of this in hand first. Okay, because you're not going to be able to straighten your horse. You haven't taught them that aid. So Ty, I've got a lovely video of him in his, not yesterday, the day before, where, I have to, with his canter around to the left, I can feel he wants to drift in. But because I've taught him to be in self-carriage and to give to the bit pressure and is to give to the head collar pressure, when he drifts into the left, I ask him to turn to the outside and I go, nope, bring your shoulder out here. And then I stop him. I can think, okay, well, he's doing that. But I stop him where I don't want to load that left hind leg, which is weaker one, too much. I stop and I only canter on one rein. I'm not going to then go and canter on the other rein. I'll then go and canter on the other rein the next session. So I'm very progressive in his training to make sure that he doesn't get too sore and fatigued, and I don't work that part of his body. And then straightness of contact, horse maintains them. This is where I'm up to with Ty. So we're not at the contact level. He's learning. And this is the same in hand. You'll see your horse maintains a head position when they're very light and flowing in hand. So by the time you get in hand, you're already, like when you're up to sort of rhythm leather in hand with retraining off the track thoroughbred, you're starting to go under saddle. You don't need to have proof level in hand before you move to go to your under saddle work. This all works altogether. So your contact level is when your horse is traveling around, horse maintains connection and outline. That's hard. That's a lot of training to get to that level, because we're also not only, it's also the body, the horse has to be able to physically maintain that outline and posture, and that's strength, correct training, and that takes a year or more for them to be able to maintain that. They have to physically be able to maintain that posture. So that's progressive. And your proof level, so this is the training. So your proof level is horse under stimuli, control of handler anywhere. So this is like, okay, your horse is nice and going around and relaxed in your arena, but then you go out to a dressage comp, they start to get a bit antsy in that. So that means that you haven't achieved proof level, that your horse is not maintaining this lovely training posture and everything wherever you go. So the proof level is examples you like, there's a video that's out there with a dressage horse going around all lovely while a tarp is being thrown over and they ride under the tarp in the dressage arena. That's an example of proof level. The horse is just going around beautiful with this tarp flapping up and down. That's an example of proof level. So I hope that makes sense. This is a long Q&A and I'm probably jumping all over the place, but anyway. And then just these little cards. So Paula, where you are at with your horse is basic to tempt, and that's where we all start. And we get stuck at basic to tempt for a while with off the track thoroughbreds, only because they've habituated to so much pressure. They've had a lot of confusion. We have to retrain them. There's a lot of confusion involved with the training with off the track thoroughbreds, because they have different riders, they have different trainers. They might be getting one type of signal from one rider, and then the next day they've got a different track work rider on them. So it's just chaos for a lot of off the track thoroughbreds, and I think they're amazing animals to be the way they are, having gone through such a demanding race career and quite often so much confusion and conflict and pain and demands and things like that. I think they're amazing. And the people that take them on, you're amazing too, guys. As what we need to realize is that it's just going to take time and patience with off the track thoroughbreds, but they're so well worth it. So I won't go too much more, but I'll just give you an example of, this is like a mini version of everything that's going to be in the off the track thoroughbred success academy and what's in the kickstart course at the moment, training style. Then you've got, I've already started this in the course, how the horse learns, like in the time going through this with the Thai course. Horses learn by negative reinforcement, pressure relief, positive reinforcement. So we've got all of this. You need to know how the horse learns. Anyway, classical conditioning, yeah, how the horse learns, how the horse moves. Okay, so there's so much. But anyway, here we go. I just talked about this. So going into your training in sets. So when I gave an example of training stop and go, your set 1 is 5 to 7 repetitions. Your set 2 is 3 to 5, because generally they'll stop closer, and set 3. So this is just training stop and go. This will be your only training session maybe for a week. Do it 4 or 5 times. And then you have that 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes break in between each set. I'll go into a lot more on that, but this is just giving you a brief outline. Phase 1, phase 2, stop, ask for light pressure first. Then you ask for a stronger aid, do it, and then you release. Everything I've explained is in these little cards. Reward and self-carriage. Anyway, these are little cards. You can talk about rider position. I mean, gosh, horse riding and training is just so intense. Goes into the 10 basic responses. There's so much. But this is just like a mini summary of everything, these cards. The aids in hand, stop and go. This is all equitation science. Anyway, these cards are really handy to have. I love them. Yeah. And the books, if you haven't got them, I think there's a second edition coming out, Academic Horse Training, but just give you a flick of this. So, I mean, look how much information. This is how much we have to learn. It's why it's not easy. And this is a more scientific version, equitation science. If you wanted to really go into more of it, this is great. This is like they're all our course textbooks. But just wanted to quickly, before I go, wanted to quickly talk about my experience. So this is The Truth About Horses. This is the first book. I love it. You can see it's a complete mess. I was given it, so I've had this for nearly 20 years. I've got, so as I said, I was down there. See, you can see I've underlined it and everything. And I was down there, and Andrew signed it for me. But I'll just show you. I was down there when he was writing this. and I still came back and I was still confused. So that just shows you how much I was still confused. But once again, you have to relearn. I'll just show. All these books are good, really good. My pony is in the clicker training, but I love classical dressage as well. So I feel like equitation science really complements classical dressage, very much complements equitation science, because I love body work and I love the subtle, because it's all your classical dressage is equitation science principles. And going into where is I'm just trying to find. It goes into positive reinforcement as well. Yes. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to find something. And I think holy moly, you know when you're trying to find something and you can't? Oh, dearie me. It's here, it's here, it's here. I'll have a look. Wait a sec. Here we go. Here it is. Just wanted to show you my horsey. There's my beautiful Toby. So Toby's that beautiful chestnut horse there. That's my horse. That's one of my horses. I have Moto and Toby. So he's a thoroughbred cross stock horse. He was a big 17-hand horse, and he was, I mean, he had an abusive beginning, but anyway, yeah. So I just wanted to say I was down there when they wrote this book. Had Toby for 18 years, and I struggled with Toby. So still, when I was down there, I came back and I was still struggling with getting him in that nice round shape, and Moto as well. So it takes a long while, but I think what I wanted to say is it's not easy, and also too, there's sometimes so what really I've been on the journey for so long now, and I'm very passionate about the welfare, but with off the track thoroughbreds, they've habituated to so much pressure, or abused horses. So Toby was abused, so they don't give as well, and they'll tense up. So horses will tense up, but Dragon was the beginning of me sort of moving from working out what was just, I suppose, just understanding it more. But yeah, giving to them. So Philippe Carl he was one that I learnt that just sort of complemented this. Philippe Carl, so he's a classical dressage coach, trainer, and I love following him as well as a few other ones. It works really well, and it just sort of just filled in that little bit of a gap. So Philippe Carl talks about giving to the bit. Okay, so off the track thoroughbreds so you need to teach all of this, but when they get a bit in the mouth, they still will, they lean into it, and they're so habituated to putting pressure on the bars in their mouth. So we need to teach them to soften their jaw, and this was sort of like what I was sort of missing. One part of it. So Philippe Carl taught to give to the bit. So you feel when you ask for the bit, and this is what I teach in my retraining now, and also do, is when you have a bit in their mouth, and I only do this after they're very light in hand, and I teach them in hand to give to their pole. So you want to feel the whole structures around their mouth. Thoroughbreds will really lock their jaw. They lean and they ring bit, so they quite often will have a luggy bit. So they lean into it and they lock their jaw. They've got a lot of tension around their pole often. Their jaw is very locked. So we need to teach them to go right back down and subtle giving to the bit, releasing their jaw muscles. So you get the bit and you just ask them for a little tilt of their head and a give to the bit, and you sort of teach them to give to the bit. So that was really good. I mean, we're not sort of up to that yet, but that's just something to keep in mind, is off the track thoroughbreds will often lean out, like they'll lock their jaw and their poll and everything around the bit. So we need to teach them to give to the bit first, so that when you ask for a little bit of left flexion, you feel that release in their jaw. Anyway, long life today, guys. I'll leave it there. And Paula, I hope that helped. And keep an eye out for the retraining with Thai series. I'm in the process of getting it back up. Getting it up. Just a lot of work to do, but it's all in there. And yeah, look, just stay tuned for more of what we spoke to today when it comes to the in-hand work, because I've got a lot of practical examples for it coming up, which is going to make it so much easier. In the meantime, if you go to my YouTube channel and watch Tommy, I have the first few lessons of teaching in hand, and he does get heavy. He gets a bit antsy too. He doesn't want to stand still. So it might be just give you an idea of what I'm talking about to see it. Anyway, I will leave it there. And I hope that has helped. And I will see you in the next Q&A, and I'll see you in the group beforehand, but we'll be here for our next Q&A next Monday, 8 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And have a lovely week, everybody, and I will see you soon. Bye.